With the Xi-Trump summit done and dusted, the US media pundits who came for the trip have long gone home. Now that we've had time to breathe and take it all in, I've invited a very special guest, CGTN anchor Liu Xin, to talk about how she feels the media aspect of the summit went. And we'll also check out an interview she did with ABC News just before the important meeting of the leaders of the two largest economies in the world. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. US President Donald Trump left China last weekend following an official visit that was the talk of the world's media. On this channel, we've already taken a look at how some of the visiting US reporters performed while in Beijing. But today I want to zoom out a little bit and take a look at the larger media picture. To talk more, please welcome today's special guest, CGTN anchor Liu Xin. Liu Xin, good to have you back on the show.
Good to be back. Thank you, Andy, for the invitation.
Awesome. Let's get straight into it. It's not an exaggeration, I don't think, to say that the meeting between China's President Xi Jinping and US President Donald Trump was the talk of the town last week, with many people's hopes hinging on kind of a reprieve from the rather gloomy international situation of late. So first up, I want to ask you a very general question, and this mainly refers to US media reporting on the summit. Do you think they did a fair job overall?
From what I gathered, from what I could watch and see on both the international media and hear what's been quoted from the Chinese side, I think it was a bit of a eye-opening tour. I think the most outstanding example was this Fox News journalist, right? You probably saw the same clips where he was playing ping-pong in the Chaoyang Park, and he was just so excited and amazed how so many people were exercising, were having fun, as if it was something so extraordinary. And for us, that was like, what's so special about people practicing, having a bit of fun playing ping-pong? And then if you zoom out and look at the context, it's not the kind of information they're getting on a daily basis. So I think they did their best, I would say, by and large. They really took in a lot of fresh perspective and new information based on the kind of reporting they have been doing all along. I think it's quite a big leap forward.
Nice. Yeah, the US often claims that its media is quote-unquote free, but I kind of feel like media there is hugely polarized and it overstimulates the population to the point oftentimes where I feel like it's about to explode. Do you think there might be such a thing as too much media freedom?
Well, I think this word "free" is always very misleading because so long as we're in the society, we're surrounded by people. There's nobody that's absolutely free. Everything we do has an impact on others, and you cannot just do what you want, which is the meaning of being free, right? So everybody has to think of the consequence and their responsibility when they approach whichever job they may find themselves doing. So in terms of media, yes, it's true. Every time I go on an American mainstream media, they always ask me this question this time as well, especially on ABC. And I was actually kind of surprised. I was like, why don't you focus on the US-China relations, the summit? But actually, when they have me on air, their primary interest or concern was about, the so-called freedom of press in China. So I think there is a misunderstanding and there is a lot of discussion to be had about the role of the media. But the fact is, if I think about it, the reality is in Western societies, people have such a deeply entrenched perception of media being free, above any particular interest or above the state or the people. Or, they think they're speaking on behalf of the people and that they must hold the authorities accountable, and hence their definition of the freedom of the media. There's such a deeply entrenched understanding of that sort that it is very difficult to go into a discussion about what is the role of media, whether media can be free, whether media should be freely reporting and saying whatever they would like to say, or they think that's right to say. So I don't go into that kind of question because it's too much above people's cognitive ability. But if we're really sitting down and talk about the role of media, I think there's a fundamental difference. And I'm speaking from my personal understanding, okay? In this regard, I'm not speaking for any institution, for any in any official capacity. My understanding really is the relationship of media vis-a-vis the government, the authorities vis-a-vis the people in China is very much different from the relationship between the media, the government, and the general public in a Western society. I don't know whether you agree with me. I think here I would more or less describe our role as a bridge between the authorities and the general public. And what do I mean by instead of an antagonist, on behalf of the general public to scrutinize the government? That's not how things are done here. And exactly by that, I mean, for instance, here we're talking about, the state and the people being one. We are not putting the state against the people and the people on the other side. And therefore, we in the media needs to stand on the side of the people and scrutinize the government. That's not how things work here. Rather, we are a bond, a connection between the government and the general public. For instance, what the government policy is, what the national strategy is, what we're doing in terms of everything, society, economy, international relations. We inform the general public, and of course, also we disseminate the important information that needs to be disseminated among the people. For instance, what kind of reform, the government is devising and how it should be implemented, and what should people on the ground, on the grassroots, understand about these reforms so that we can together, follow the same goal and work together. So, and vice versa. On the other hand, we do report from various sectors of society, from different regions, for different groups, what they are saying, what's happening on the ground, and then pull it together to inform the policymaker and to inform other parts of the country that may not have this information had there not been the media. So like that, there is two-way understanding, two-way traffic. And of course, there are also the grievances, the problems, the obstacles, the challenges that may arise when the country move forward, and what is being done to address these problems, so on and so forth. So I think in the end, this is a relationship that's much less antagonistic and much more constructive, I would say. The important thing is to remember this is not something that China would say you adopted to. This is something that's developed on the basis of Chinese political culture, on the basis of Chinese traditional culture, and something that has proven to be effective since China's, especially since China's reform and opening up. All of these years, we have managed to progress so rapidly to achieve such transformation, and precisely because we have this more or less harmonious relationship between the government and the people as a result of the bonding effect of the media. So it really has to be looked at from a different perspective.
I think that's a really interesting way of putting it. I've never heard it described in that way before, a kind of bridge between the government and the people. I think that's very accurate. And also you mentioned, which is very important, it's not just a one-way bridge, it's a two-way bridge, because very often media in China does highlight stories from the people. That is kind of a way of getting that story to the government so things can be changed. So I think that's really important. For me, there's another major distinction between Western and Chinese media, and that is that Western media, perhaps because of their so-called freedom, they really prefer drama and conflict, I guess, to get clicks to sell magazines, while Chinese media is somewhat more factual and probably to the ordinary Western viewer a bit stale. Do you think somewhere in the middle might be the sweet spot?
if you look at human nature, it is by our nature that we want to see drama. We want to see sensational headlines because that's how we are naturally wired to be intrigued. And that's why we click on certain stories, because the headline looks very sensational, looks new, looks exciting, or, fatalistic. So we understand all of that. But I think as media connecting the authorities to the people in a country with such a long history and with so much in stake, 1.5 billion people, great implications for the whole world. I think there's a grave sense of responsibility to bring out the big picture and not to do cheap yellow journalism to achieve clickbaits. Of course, we also need to attract people's attention, but not by being sensationalizing, by especially amplifying the negative and the unhealthy, even toxic phenomenon or what is behind it. I think there is a great sense of responsibility when we're doing our story. For instance, when I'm doing a story, I'm thinking of the response people are going to get from it. Are they going to understand the big picture, that there are problems, something might be wrong, but there are things that's being done about it so that people don't lose hope in the authorities, in the system. Just now I was talking about the relationship between the media, the government, and the people. I think there has to be a very there has to be a few preconditions. What is it? First of all, the system has to work. The system has to have a track record of delivering to the people, because you can tell people, look, something went wrong, but there's a lot being done about it. Don't you worry. But if there's nothing that's really being done about it, people will say, okay, you deceived me, you cheated. I'm not going to trust you anymore. But the track record here in China is it has been a system that has really delivered for the people. And people can check what they're told on the news and what they see in their life, what they can get their hands on, and by and large, they kind of match each other. There are, discrepancies at the gaps here and there, but by and large, and if you look at the 50 years of reform and opening up, I think it's a stunning miracle that China has achieved as a result of this effective system. And the people, they are very clear. They see it, they live it, so I think the precondition really is that the system is one that continues to deliver, and it has delivered that it continues to deliver. Secondly, also extremely important, that the people who are in the governing position they are extremely aware of the fact that people have high expectations on them. So they have the sense of urgency to cleanse themselves, to reform themselves so that they can, fight the problems and continue to deliver. What do I mean? For instance, we have all kinds of internal disciplinary organs and mechanisms that are in place so that even if a media story may not be as blown up about something which happened that people are not very satisfied with, you can be sure that the central government is aware of the problem and they are addressing it through their internal discipline. Some numbers I can share, for instance, anti-corruption case. And Andy, you're in China, so you must understand how vigorous, right? How much effort is put in to clean the party so that there are no corrupt officials, that the system is efficient, and this is an ongoing process. I quickly checked, for instance, just in the first 3 quarters of last year, about 800,000 cases were filed in terms of anti-corruption, and I think some 700,000 penalties were wrote out. And these people, sometimes the offense would be considered minor. For instance, going to a banquet, But in China, the standard is very high because the leadership, the authorities, they understand if they don't use the utmost emphasis or effort to curb corruption so that people continue to be satisfied with the government, they will have a really big crisis. So that is just to give you an example of how on top of how the system continues to deliver, there is a very rigorous campaign and ongoing effort to continually keep the government, the ruling party, clean and efficient so they can continue to deliver. So these are just some preconditions, I think, for how the Chinese media scene works. It's rather unique, but there are its own logics.
So maybe Chinese media is privy to the mandate of heaven as well.
Mandate of the people. Yeah.
Mandate of the people. Yeah, very true. You took part in a few interviews actually with mainstream US media in the lead up to the Xi-Trump summit. First up, let's take a quick look at a clip from your interview with ABC News.
On the eve of this trip, we learned that the mayor of Arcadia, California, agreed to plead guilty to a federal charge of acting as an illegal foreign agent for China, also promoting Chinese propaganda. So in light of that, how can the U.S. trust China right now?
Well, I do not know the details of that case. I actually only read about it on media, and this is the U.S. judicial process. There is no place for me to pass my personal comment on the case, and whether or not the case is fair, she's getting fair trial. I have absolutely no idea, but I do see a pattern. I do see that the targeting of Chinese journalists, for instance, or anything that is speaking fairly, objectively about China is labeled pro-China, and it's a propaganda, and that these people are secret agent for China. I mean, these are very vague terms, and they're very big terms. So when you're giving these very big and very frightening-looking headlines, you're creating a fear about China. When you're focused on these negative stories instead of the bright side, I think it is very difficult for people to trust the Chinese.
So quite an amicable chat there with ABC, and I appreciate how you tried your best to explain to our US colleague how much the world would benefit from a bit of positive news, at least every once in a while. And do you believe that this is at all possible, though, when it comes to Western media?
I think it's extremely difficult. I think the relationship has become, as you mentioned up front, extremely polarized. Actually, the trust of Western audience in their media is very low. If you look at different poll numbers, some as low as less than 1/3. And in general, I think it is recognized as a fact that the general public trust in Western institutions, especially in the most developed countries such as the US, the UK, Germany, France, Japan, they are the least ranked among countries in the world. And if you look at the same poll, and I'm talking about Western polls, I'm not talking about Chinese government numbers, because people are going to say, Liu Xin, you're only quoting Chinese numbers. I'm quoting numbers, for instance, from Gallup poll, from Edelman Trust Barometer, and there is also a study from Harvard University Kennedy School, and they're not just doing a one-stop snapshot. All of these barometer, they share something in common, which is it's a continuous annual survey, so they can track the trend. And what is really interesting, and sometimes the people behind the polls find it a bit difficult to understand, how come there is a continuous even increase among Chinese people's trust in public institutions, including the government, including in traditional media, even including Chinese enterprises. And the number is extraordinarily high. If you look at the Harvard Kennedy School survey, they did for 13 years, up to 2016, and the Chinese people's trust in the central government especially is over 90%, okay, and it has been continuing to increase. In terms of Edelman, the Trust Barometer, they do a yearly survey in this regard, and it's 25 years ongoing. And the number is very much in sync with what I just mentioned with the Harvard Kennedy School survey. The trust of Chinese people in traditional media, for instance, I believe is somewhere over 80%. And And by and large, because of what I just said, the system continues to deliver so that when it tells people certain information, people can match what they're told with what they get their hands on, hence the high trust. Whereas in the West, I think there has been a very difficult cycle because of partisan divide. For instance, the Republicans, they would very much go on Fox News, and the media, the Fox News journalists would very much hold scrutiny of Democratic president and vice versa. And when you do that for decades, I think it is sometimes you're doing it for the sake of doing it, not because one president is particularly bad or that because but because of the political inclination of that media organization. And by the way, we don't have that in China. In China, we have one big governing party. Of course, there are several smaller parties, but the ruling party is this one party which has been in power since the past 8 decades. So it has unlimited liability, as I said. You cannot say it's the Republicans or it's the Democrats, who did this. They cannot say I inherited a high inflation number. You cannot say that. Whether or not you deliver, you have to shoulder that responsibility. Therefore, it has to keep delivering. And on the other hand, it doesn't have this mudslinging from both directions. And as a direct result of that, the media in the United States, I believe, and in some other Western countries, are particularly polarized, and the result of that is people's lack of trust in the media. They simply don't know which one to trust, whether they're saying it because it is the fact that something failed, or simply because it's the other side that you have fallen into a habit of blaming, so that people are more satisfied or people are happier with what you do, your political party or what. So I think at this moment it's very difficult to change that, and that's why it's also very frustrating when I go on ABC. These news. I was on NBC before. I was on CBS this time as well. By and large, the premise is that China's media is not free, that the media in the United States is free, and therefore the United States system is doing something right, and the Chinese system is not doing something right. And I don't go into that kind of discussion because it's very, very difficult. On the other hand, I have to give credit that oftentimes the journalists, the presenters themselves, they harbor no evil thoughts or harmful thoughts towards me as a person. The fact that they invite me on, I have to be very grateful and I am very appreciative. It's just that, these preconceived ideas are just so deeply entrenched that it's very difficult for the US media to have some kind of calibration so that, the media's function will be different. I think it's very, very difficult.
Two very fundamentally different systems. And I guess you could say China doesn't have, what is it in Chinese? 在野党, 在野媒体.
Opposition
Is that how you say
parties. Opposition
Yeah,
parties.
I guess China doesn't have opposition media either, which is a huge difference. Last question today, Xin, because I know you're super busy. What do you think US media in particular could learn from China's media style, if anything?
Well, it's pompous. It's pompous to say what they can learn from us. I would rather say we still have a lot of room for improvement. How to make our information more relevant, more interesting. When I was in the US, when I go on US media, what I find is a huge gap of information. The journalists, the anchors, the ordinary people in general, they have a very big lack of information about China. Hence, the Fox News journalist was so surprised, right, when he saw a robot in a 7-Eleven shop, and he was so surprised because there's not.
And that's so old in China.
Yeah, you think what? And also Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, when he was in the Great Hall of the People, for 3 times he saw the ceiling of the Great Hall of the, and he was truly intrigued and amazed. That just shows how little they understand China. On the one hand, the American press can probably do a much better job, but on the other hand, how can we be more effective, so that our content is more consumed, let's say, by the American general public without without them hardening their, I would say, prejudice or bias against Chinese media. It's a long shot, but I think eventually it will be good for both sides. Um, I have to say, maybe there are changes or signs of hope that we can look forward to. For instance, this time when I was on CBS, the journalist was really very objective and neutral. She's based in Hong Kong. She probably knows this part of the world slightly better, and she didn't portray me in a negative light. And the ABC News or the NBC News in the past, every time they had me on, they were friendly. They just didn't know better. So I have to give them full credit on that. And with social media, on YouTube, for instance, there are a lot of people who have actually seen what they have been fed as information about China has not been adequate, has not been useful. Actually, when they come to China, they all totally surprised how normal this country is. So I think things are changing. Maybe all sides can do something better.
A very noble answer, Liu Xin. I asked you how the US media could improve, and you kind of looked at us as Chinese media to ask how we can improve. That's really, really nice.
Well, we all have limitations, right? We all have limitations. We all have prejudice and biases. So, let things run its course. I think eventually the things will be better. At the result of this trip, I would say the perception, hopefully, will change to a large degree. Whether things relapse back to where it was, I don't know. But I think every time you know a person a bit better, you look in the other in the eye, I think it makes a difference.
Liu Xin from CGTN, it is always such a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Andy, for the opportunity. Always fun to chat with you.
And on that note, that will be all for today, you guys. But as always, I would love to hear your thoughts. Can the US media learn anything from Chinese media? Or will it always be doom and gloom? Do let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.